Let me start by thanking all the colleagues from Bangladesh Apparel Exchange that were involved in the preparation and organization of this event. Of course, led by Mustafiz, and thanks to him for bringing us together here to discuss relevant topics. And of course, many thanks as well to our GIZ colleagues who were also involved in the preparation of this event. If you look around, either on your tables or in the lobby, you will find a QR code that refers to the study that we are trying to discuss today. Before introducing the fantastic panel, I would like to give a very brief presentation on the content of it. We have heard earlier in the speech of Jan Janowski that we had elections in Europe last Sunday. And for Germany, we can look at the results and see that almost 15% of the population is following a track that is against the European Union, right-wing approach. We can also look at 85% that are in favor of the European Union. But if we want to change something, it might make sense to look at these 15% and try to address their needs, their questions, their challenges, or find ways to engage with them. Similarly, we have heard already that Bangladesh has a fantastic success story, especially in this textile sector, but that shouldn't disallow us from looking at the spaces where we still can change things. And if we look at the jute sector, if we look at the recycling, waste management, and sorting sector, we should not think immediately only of BGMEA and BKMEA and all the producers that are related to it. Basically, this discussion should be with the BTG-WPEA, whose president Farouk is here today. We're talking about textile and garment waste. And the association is then called Processing and Export Association. But it's somehow a different topic. Of course, it's related to the production and the supply chain and the value chain, but it's a different topic. And we have one big white elephant in any room, and it's a decision that not GIZ nor any of the panelists here is to take, but it's a decision that the government and the society of Bangladesh has to take. Do we look at that elephant or not? Do we change the public transport, the bus system? Do we look at the people who gain money from that? There are systems in this country that are bound to favor politicians, other stakeholders that have access to money, that claim informal ways of collecting money, of pressurizing people, and of channeling funds through informal and illegitimate means. It's not nice to say, but we say it out of interest to promote better outcomes for Bangladesh as a whole and for the specific technical elements that we are trying to discuss. So let's keep that in mind when we look at the results of this study. In the sorting and recycling business of Bangladesh, the way the textile scrap, the jute, comes out of the factories and ends up in sorting and processing facilities is often, depending on the region, depending on the location, non-transparent, informal, and run by middlemen. And probably some women, but let's call it middlemen. This is something we can decide to ignore, and we might be looking to a prosperous future anyways. But it's our firm conviction, and we will hear later whether this conviction is shared or not, but it's our firm conviction from the technical perspective that by including these informal systems in a formalized way, in a transparent way, everybody will gain. Everybody will make more money. And the conditions for the people that work in those industries will also get better. Together with H&M, we commissioned this study to address three main objectives that are related to the tensions that I've described earlier. First ambition, to create high-value circular opportunities for Bangladesh's textile sector. Second, to find inclusive solutions to the informal jute sector. Again, the win-win, to try to formalize the informal by not losing anyone, by providing options also to the ones that work in informal processes. And the third, to enable a just transition to circular textile value chains. This is very relevant because there is existing ecosystems that are focusing maybe on downcycling, on, you know better than me, on filling pillows, etc. We don't want, just transition means that we don't want to take something away from a population or workers or industries, small and medium, that are already existing. They have their own livelihood. It's not about taking that away and giving it to a more valuable chain, but rather to find ways to connect those intentions. We are aware, and we heard that today, and of the biographic elements that Mustafiz was describing for the last 10 years, that circular economy somehow is a major trend on the international level that we have to address. In our heads, it might be the focus on the waste management, how to transfer waste into resources. These are the small loops within circular processes. And of course, there is a bigger picture of ambitions towards a proper circular economy that starts from the design of products, from the energy and water and resource consumption during the production process until the end of life. Data is a little bit of a challenge. We are always speaking about around about 330,000 tons of available feedstock, cotton-based, for the industry here, which is a huge amount, and that could really also be a win-win situation to enable primary resources that are somehow built or existing inside Bangladesh. The study has identified three relevant headlines, I would say, that has to be addressed in a policy way or in a cooperative way, as we heard before. The challenge of receiving mixed or contaminated waste, so to segregate it, how to avoid that the cotton-based waste is not, let's say, dirty. Limited visibility, so the traceability is a challenge. We don't know exactly how much, where, and what is it from, especially if it comes through the middlemen into the system. And the compliance, of course, that is related to this informal trade. Such a database would help all of us to understand the waste composition, the quantity, the type, the color, these specifications that are relevant then for the further processing of the materials. As I said, currently there are different jute handling clusters across Bangladesh, and we will hear also from the study that the Copenhagen Business School and BRAC University is doing, how this is even transboundary connected with Indian clusters as well. And we all know that for the downcycling, as I said earlier, mattress fillings, insulation materials, geotextiles, and lastly, there are also the incineration processes, of course, that go together with the jute. For the survey that is part of this study, 180 informal factories were visited and addressed. 150 of them are jute handlers and 30 are jute processors. And the inputs from 20 formal RMG factories, how they deal with their post-industrial waste, the cutting waste, has also been connected there. Traditionally, the handling of the jute, as many of you may know, is that there is a first party that has a direct access to the factory, either legal, contractual, or informal and maybe locally influential groups. They sell it then to the sorters. They give it to wholesale traders that try to sell it to other local sellers or to exporters. So basically, we can structure it. It's not always like that, but basically there are these four steps of processing of the jute. And the idea is, if we want to address a policy solution for this space, to look into the four layers of processing. Again, we provided the QR code. You can all read the study. There are fantastic graphs there as well. Patrick Schröder, who is one of the co-authors of this study, is here in the room. You will hear from him later as well. Samuel, who is also one of the co-authors, is unluckily not here today. But we are happy also to engage in further questions that you may have. We are aware that what do we do then with the jute? The global supply chain has a robust interest in getting feedstock and getting inputs for their own processing so they can document a proper recycling process. You will also hear later from recyclers that are operating on that very high level, where the materials that they receive are clean and are not passing through the sorting and processing part. But in general, in Bangladesh, the focus is on mechanical recycling that can include the shredding of the material to make cotton again. Of course, upcycling is one of the paths. Then the thermomechanical process to make resins from polyester fabric. And what many of the sorters try to do eventually is to bleach out the color. If it's cotton-based, to look at as white as possible again. Currently, the existing exporting scheme from these businesses goes mainly towards India and Asian markets beyond India, but also 20% goes to Europe and 7% to the United States of America. So it's existing supply chains that have an export and an international sphere. The idea, of course, would be to make it more profitable to sell it in, or use it within Bangladesh. The gender dimensions that we identified in these processes relate to the presence of child labor, to the presence of women of advanced age that have a very low salary, limited access to sanitation facilities, limited use of PPE. We heard earlier dust, noise, etc., fire hazard. Yeah, it's a challenging space, but we're all here to try to find a healthy way to engage with it. To finalize this very big, very intense wrap-up, the authors have proposed 6 main policy recommendations that I would like also to share with the panel. The first one is to incorporate data availability, transparency, and traceability into the systems. So how much do we produce, how much is being channeled into these sorting facilities, etc. Introduce industry guidelines for jute management and recycling standards. Implement changes in VAT and tariff rules for the jute transactions, so to make them more formal, but also to make them more easier to make them formal. Provide economic incentives to formalize collection, handling, and sorting. A central depository system or a hub for decent work and social inclusion, because there is a challenge in this part of the industry. And to impose investment environment for state-of-the-art recycling technologies, which might even include chemical recycling facilities, but we know that this is very expensive, and we will hear now from the esteemed panel what is maybe a priority, what is a reaction to the findings of our study, what are their own findings, what are their own interests. Please allow me to sit down and I will introduce them to you. Thank you very much. Now? Yes. Good afternoon again. Sorry for the long introduction, but I think it was relevant at least for us to share some of the motivations also for this study. First of all, I'm very happy to welcome Rumi Akter here in representation of the joint project that the Copenhagen Business School and the BRAC University CED is engaged in, and we're all looking forward to the results in the next couple of weeks. It's also a great pleasure to have Gagan Bansal here from H&M. She's the Circular Innovation Lab Material and Process Impact Manager of the H&M Group. That is also a good title for an abbreviation. Then we have Asadun Noor from UNIDO. You know that the switch to circular economy project of UNIDO is together with the BAE study that Mustafis was making reference before, the pioneer in addressing on the policy level the situation, let's say, of the circular economy approach in Bangladesh. Welcome to all of you. Unluckily, Nazim Satter from the SME Foundation could not make it, but let me just say that the SME Foundation has a very robust assessment of many of the sectors that are relevant for this discussion, and it would be, we will try to find a way to incorporate the SME Foundation's view on these things later on. But now, without further ado, maybe we can start with you, Rumi. Probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I anticipate that the focus could be a little bit on how you perceive the just transition. So what happens with the existing clusters and how do they look like? What are their perspective? If you could elaborate a little bit on the content of your study.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. At first, I'd like to thank Michael and Mustafis Bhai for inviting me to this forum discussion. So before I delve deep into the jute sector, let me give you a brief on our project. So CED BRAC University is running this project titled Climate Change and Global Value Chains in the RMG and Textile Industry in Bangladesh and Europe. So we are co-partnered with 3 universities from Denmark: Copenhagen Business School, Aalborg University, and Roskilde University. So far, we have tried 4 aspects or dimensions of the apparel industry in this project. So some of my colleagues have worked in 3 parts of the project. Let me just give you an overview of that. First one is conceptualizing the role of climate change mitigation and adaptation in the RMG global value chains, and also we also mapped out the actors, the drivers, scope of practices, and relevant policy responses of the relevant stakeholders by interviewing them. So we mainly focused on government officials, development partners, and other relevant stakeholders. Secondly, we also looked into the effect of climate change on our RMG factories in terms of environmental upgrading, buyer-supplier relationship, sustainability. Third, which is very interesting, we also mapped the Bangladesh's slow fashion brands, which is just the opposite of the current trend of fast fashion. So the brands that typically describe themselves as long-lasting, sustainably manufactured clothes from sustainably sourced fabrics. And finally, the mapping of the jute sector, where I'm working on. So we have tried to map out the existing clusters in Bangladesh of the jute clusters, where we also include the relevant initiatives of the relevant stakeholders. So as Michael mentioned, I'm going to just give you 3 points of the jute clusters in Bangladesh. So first one is the structure of the cluster, the recycling cluster. Secondly, I'll talk about on the worker conditions on the cluster, and finally, policy implications for this sector. So the structure of the recycling cluster. We are basically trying to look into the recycling, RMG and textile recycling industry through the lens of global economic theories, for instance, global value chains and global recycling networks. So these are our theoretical framework for this study. So basically, GBC has 2 parts, GBC mapping and GBC analysis, which are based on 6 dimensions. For instance, there are 2 aspects of these dimensions. 3 are global and 3 are local. For instance, the global dimensions are geographical scope, lead firms, and its activities. And locally, we are also trying to look into the institutional context, the stakeholders, and the upgrading. I mean, what kind of upgradation is going on in the clusters? So we have taken so far 4 clusters that are exist in Bangladesh. The Mirpur cluster, Narayanganj cluster, Ghazipur cluster, and Pabna cluster. And interestingly, what we found that apart from the Pabna cluster, we have more or less similarities between these 3 clusters of Mirpur, Narayanganj, and Ghazipur. So, for instance, if you map this cluster in terms of GVC, so you look into the types of activities, types of products in the cluster. So in the Ghazipur cluster, we have found that there are approximately 2,000 to 3,000 shops are there, or maybe we can call them warehouses or SMEs. And the main activity, main products are, there are basically 2 markets, 2 separate markets. One market is for the bigger portion of cloths, which are known as the end of rolling, intact or half intact, and cut pieces of clothes. And there is another separate market where you can find only the cutting and sewing scraps, which is basically known as jute scraps or the cotton clips. So the main activities of this cluster is sorting and exporting, because Ghazipur is the cluster where the export starts to other countries, especially to India and to some other European countries as well. And in the Mirpur cluster, there are about 200 to 300 shops are there, and the main products are knit and woven scraps, polyester scraps, and you can also find other waste that comes out from the garments with the jute. For instance, bobbin, needles, polypapers, carton, etc. But everything is sorted out there, and everything is sold out to respective customers. So the main activities of this cluster is sorting, recycling, and reusing. Regarding the Narayanganj cluster, this is also the same to these 2 clusters that I mentioned. So there are around 300 shops are there. So you can find mostly knit and woven scraps there, and also rejected garments there. So main activities are sorting and recycling. Now coming to the Pabna cluster, which is very interesting. So Pabna cluster is basically the upcycling cluster of these jute scraps, where you can find basically, mostly the bigger portion of cloths, for instance, the intact or half intact and cut pieces, which ranges between 18 to 54 inches. And major activities of this cluster is to manufacture clothes from these scraps and export them to mostly in India, and now they have also a big market in Malaysia. So why is this important? Why I'm talking about this mapping of this cluster? Because when you map something through GVC, you can show each and every dot of the waste. For instance, where does it come from, and where does it end? So one of the major findings of our study, I would say, is debunking the existing narratives of jute scraps that it goes to landfill. I would say it doesn't go to the landfill anymore. It was supposed to go to the landfill in previous years, but now I would say that less than 1% jute maybe goes to landfill, but it doesn't go to landfill. For instance, if you take into consideration the case of Mirpur cluster, if you go there, you will see that each and everything is sorted out, recycled, reused, and resold to respective factories or customers. Okay, so now I'll talk about the workers' conditions in the recycling chain, where we found similar sort of findings that the report that you have shared, Michael. For instance, the labor force in the recycling chain is very diverse. If we talk about the women workers who mostly work as sorters. So, for instance, women from age group of 16 to 65 years and even more, they work there. So why these people work there? Because if you compare with the formal sector where they lack the formal education or formal sort of things, they lack it. And that's why these people are I think, involved in this sector. So, and these people are not fit to work in the formal sector because you can find old people, adolescent, women with children who has this sort of flexibility to work there. And there is also a division of labor between men and women workers. So women are the mostly sorting workers there. And the man workers, they basically do the rigorous jobs of loading and unloading the jute scraps. And regarding the wage, which Michael already mentioned, that it's very low. For instance, a sorting worker gets paid roughly 200 to 250 taka per day, which is 6,000 to 7,000 taka per month. Apart from these factors, we have also tried to look into the decent work conditions, which is not there. And they also suffer from some sort of physical barriers, I would say. Mostly they suffer from respiratory diseases, as they work in a very dusty place. And mostly the workers do not wear any face masks, or they do not wear any gloves. I mean, there are no protective measures to protect themselves from this dust or this dusty environment. So, and another point I missed out. So we are not just looking into this recycling chain in Bangladesh. As I mentioned, that we are also looking into the global recycling network. So there is regional mapping. We are also trying to look into that. For instance, we have colleagues from India and Pakistan as well who are working there. So we are trying to compare the clusters in Bangladesh and India. For instance, there is a cluster in Tirupur in India, which is, I think, in Tamil Nadu. So the jute scraps from Bangladesh actually is exported to that cluster, where they recycle it and make yarn out of it, and we import the yarns from there. So we are trying to also look into that, but that work is finished yet. And finally, regarding the policy implications, I do agree with Michael that the main policy or measure should be to ensure transparency and traceability of this sector, because this is the main requirement of these upcoming EU regulations and the brand requirements. So, and Bangladesh will definitely face this challenge if we do not align ourselves with these upcoming EU legislations, because EU is the major export destination of our country. And another finding of our research is that currently Bangladesh does not have any comprehensive strategy for garment and textile recycling. We do not even have any circular economy strategy. Maybe we have some sort of portion in, let's say, in our industrial policy, or maybe in export policy and some other acts. But we do not have a comprehensive strategy or policy for this sector. So the government should come, I mean, everyone, the relevant stakeholders should come forward and put forward an act or a policy to implement circularity. Because circularity can bring, reduce the import expenditure by 15% for Bangladesh. So that's a huge number. And lastly, I would say that this is just the beginning. This is not the end. And circularity does not just mean to recycle the jute scraps or the fabric scraps. There are other dimensions of it. Let's say focusing on renewable energy. So we should focus on that as well for our well-being and for the well-being of our industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rumi. Looking really forward to the release of that study. Now, Gagan, as H&M is a let's say, responsible for this study that we have shared through the QR code. And the question that comes a little bit also after looking at these working conditions, is there even a potential business case that allows for better conditions? And we wanted a little bit to contribute to a sort of baseline or to the conversation. It doesn't mean that this study will solve everything or address everything. It's just a meaningful contribution to the discussion. So what part of that discussion would you want to highlight?
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. And what a great study, Rumi. Amazing. We will wait for that report too. So before I go into what we did with GIZ together, why we started off, I think I would like to share what is H&M Group's vision and where we started off with this discussion. H&M Group wants to move from linear to circular model. And as Rumi mentioned, circularity is not just about recycling. Circularity is circular supply chains, circular products, circular models. So we are not just talking circularity in terms of recycling. We are talking circularity in terms of our total business model that we have with H&M. And coming to the circular products in that part, so since we are not discussing all the parts today, we will be, I just wanted to share that circular products is one part of it. And in that one part, we have also set our vision that we want to use as less virgin materials as possible. So for 2025, we had set a 30% recycle goal, and today we are already on 25, 26%. But 2030, we aim to double that. We want to, or we aim to have 50% recycled materials in our products. And that's not because of any regulations that are coming, but that's our own aim, because we wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we try and use as less virgin resources as possible by utilizing the resources that we already exist in the environment. And that's where it all started off. And while we are doing this, while we set the ambition, without having any project reports or any deep dives, we thought it might be very easy. So in 2020, we started off and took a project where we said, okay, let's tell all our suppliers to send their waste to the recyclers. And in 2022, we have 80 suppliers already in that supply chain where we are already recording 8,500 tons of waste material going to the recyclers through reverse resources platform, which is also one of the new platform that came to say, okay, we can trace where the waste is going and where it is coming from and who's utilizing that. So we tried that also. And while doing this, we tried other projects like UNIDO, switched to circular economy. We went in and did plastics recycling project, and we are still doing that. We are also bringing some innovators like cotton poly innovators, CIRC, to Bangladesh to work with all the local stakeholders so that we can try and test those innovations here. But all this work, while it's happening, we also realized that we needed to do a proper study. And that's what it started off with GIZ. And I think it came out as a great report to some of the problems and the challenges that we were facing while we started this project. We knew that it's an informal sector, and it came out very visibly that while we were doing that project, that it's very difficult when we start doing those conversations to start collecting the waste and start sending it to certain recyclers that we want. So that was one of the first, and that's where the whole topic of today is formalizing the informal jute sector is. And the second one, which I think was very much highlighted, was that since Bangladesh does not have a circular policy or infrastructure or a framework on which we can build this, we need to have that. And when I'm talking about that, all other countries, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's China, whether it's Bangladesh, or whether it's India, I'm not saying that everybody else is running on it. Everybody else is also formulating and trying to understand what they can do towards it. So if you look at just how Vietnam is talking about it, they have already set the strategy. Turkey, they have already set the strategy, but it's on paper. It's still not got into a stage where it has become executional. China is already talking about textile waste goals by 2025 and 2030, which they need to utilize, but it's not started off as a real work. Whereas in Bangladesh, we have already started doing the studies, we have working on the projects, we have these forums, and all the stakeholders, NGOs and brands and different stakeholders in the government are coming together and working towards it. So I see progress in Bangladesh, but this is just the step one. We need to start working towards the step two, which is formulating the strategies towards how do we make sure that we bring this informal to a formal sector. And to that, we need to bring the incentivization discussion, where we have to remove taxes. We have to bring technologies from outside to Bangladesh only when Bangladesh is welcoming them. Because mechanical recycling can reach only a stage. After that, it will not be able to grow because there are durability concerns as soon as we talk about mechanical recycling. So we need to switch towards new innovative technologies, which are there, but those technology, as Mustafa has mentioned in the speech before, we need to welcome them. We need to bring them here with the renewable energy setup that they are looking for. Because they are right now looking and hunting countries where they have feedstock, plus they have renewable energy, to work towards it and see that can they set up the plants near to the production, rather than being in Europe or US, which is far away, which might be a model coming up, but it won't be a scalable model. Scalable model will only happen in production. And that's why it's very important that we need to bring these aspects when we are talking about the GIZ report to take into action now going forward. Plus the last aspect which Rumi mentioned about the social and transparency. We are currently in the supply chains where we have fibers coming from polyester, recycled polyester, cotton, farming, and now we are heading towards a completely different ballgame, which is a recycling sector where the origin of the source is collection. The origin of the source is people involved in sorting. So we need to make sure that we have a complete focus towards that part also by formalizing this as an industry. And it's a great opportunity because it will bring new further employment in the industry, which could be formalized, which could be enhancing for the industry and can take it forward from here. So in all, I think I only see opportunities when I see GIZ. We started off with challenges, but then we went towards the recommendations, because those recommendations are the ones which will change the industry from where we are today. We have moved a lot, but we can still move further on. So I hope that all of us will come together and do that.
Thank you so much. Now we heard the voice of academia, we had the voice of a global brand, and now we will hear the voice of UNIDO as a policy advising institution and implementer of the Switch to Circular Economy project that works closely together with the government, especially the Ministry of Commerce, I think. So Asad, if you could just comment or criticize the study or disagree with certain findings, and maybe also shed lights on where you feel that there is energy to change, modify, amend, produce policies, strategies, or implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. I like to take the opportunity to welcome you all on this session and congratulate GIZ and H&M for these wonderful publications and studies. So after hearing from Rumi and Gagan, it is difficult for me to pitching up a better voice among yourself and others to being the transitional strategy on the circular economy. But let me try best. So let's consider in a different way why this informality begins. As Rumi mentioned that this due to our social and economical conditions, our this kind of organic industries or supply chains are developed in Bangladesh. And fortunately or unfortunately, our economy is about 40% dependent to the GDP on these informal sectors as a whole. And just today morning, I came to know that there is a study on ILO, a study of ILO that they recommended or adopted a recommendation on informal transitions. They called it R204 regarding the transition of these informal sectors. And most importantly, Bangladesh is going to be a middle income country by November 24, 2026. Following the speech from Mustafiz Bhai and many other speakers from the inauguration sessions, we are feeling that Bangladesh, as a second largest producing country of RMG or textile, we are and very much needed to have some quick or efficient shift to these industries. And that is why we come to in the switch to circular economy value chains project, and this is funded by European Union and Government of Finland. And we are supporting 3 value chains in the 3 countries. For Bangladesh, we are very much focused in textiles, and for Morocco, we are focusing on plastic, and for Egypt, we are focusing on ICT value chains. So why switch came to this story is that very much connected with the upcoming regulations. You may know that last 27 May, European Commission adopted the ESPR formally, and later on they also adopted CSDDD formally. So these are the market guidelines or the directives we have to follow as a global chain actors, and for supporting or assuring our stake to the market of European Union and other countries, we are very much needed to adopt this kind of transformations. What is switch to circular economy brings to us? For Bangladesh, yes, we are partnering, and we are happy to partnering with H&M and Bestseller in Bangladesh to support their suppliers, industries in terms of technology innovations, in terms of traceabilities, in terms of policy assistance for the government, in terms of capacity building, and as well as most importantly for financial inclusions, we have institutions called EIB with us, European Investment Bank, and just to re-echo our partners that our colleague from Chatham House will also present a presentation for a circular economy roadmap later on this event. And by this project, we are piloting some business cases, specifically how this circular transition could be a proper business case for the supply chain or value chain actors. Because from my understanding and our project approach, we believe that without any economic return or economic growth, it is very difficult or challenging for policymakers or the stakeholders also to maintain the efficient sustainability of a value chain or an economic shift. And by this project specifically, we had some studies also with the lead from Chatham House, and I also agree with Michael, your study recommendation. And of course, if the study and the sector is the same, we have the same feelings on that. And I appreciate your specific recommendation on that. And regarding on that studies by Switch to Circular Economy, we have found that following the European Union guidelines or directives, we need to shift our mind as soon as possible, because otherwise we will lose the market intention or market interest from Bangladesh, unfortunately. So what Switch is very much connected with today's discussion is that formalization of the jute collection process. We have a specific pilot on this jute collection or the informal collection system of the textile waste that is led by Bestseller, and we are partnering with BGMEA, and our traceability partner is Reverse Resource. And most importantly, to amplify our voice with the global stakeholders, GFA is with us. For this pilot specifically, we are trying to develop or initiate a research and studies for this blended cotton waste into a tangible and commercially viable product for our brand partner as Bestseller. And preparing on that, we need to onboard these informal sectors or semi-formal sectors, I should say that, how they could be more prepared on the transition of traceability and developing their workplaces, their well-beings and these kind of things could be a proper business case for the bestseller. How the bestseller could be benefited from this kind of circular transformation, as well as each and every actor should need some benefits in terms of economic benefits and other value-added benefits from the value chain. Yes, we do agree with some policy recommendation and reformation is very much needed for this. And most importantly, I like to stop now, and most importantly, we found that everyone knows about circular economy that Mustafiz Bhai re-echoed at the morning, and everyone feeling on that we need to shift. But most important thing is that the actions we are expecting on this transformation is still need a stronger commitment from specifically from the government, parallelly as well as from the business leaders, the associations, and the manufacturers to become and sustain your business and trade towards European Union and any other export destinations. So these are the visions we need to concrete, and today's platform is the best platform to share our learnings and strengthen our commitment towards this transformation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. If Nazim Zatar from the SME Foundation would be here, he would probably say the title of the plenary session is already wrong, because as you said, it's not formalizing the informal jute sector, because parts of the jute sector are very formal, some are semi-formal. At least most of the small enterprises have a trade license to start with. The working conditions might be a bit difficult, but the formalization as such depends also how to define it. And the informality refers a little bit to the system, how the product comes into that sorting and recycling process. If there is no reaction to one of the previous commentators, I think considering the time, we would close it here. But we are proud to have taken up the recommendations from the first plenary to coordinate and cooperate, and we can guarantee to all of you that we, together with the BGMA, BKMEA, BTGW, PEA, and also the Ministry of Commerce and the government, it's also always difficult to bring additional secretaries, joint secretaries to these kind of events, but they are aware, we talk to them, they are our partners, so we can guarantee that we are representing a hopefully fruitful cooperation between the government, academia, the private sector, and the technical cooperation. Thank you very much and have a pleasant afternoon.